Welcome to The More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. I'm Rebecca Kushmiter, coming off a frantic weekend of driving way too many places. And I am joined here on the mic by Greg Matuzak.
Your common sense liberal from Cincinnati, Ohio, who's very glad. This is the first week I was very glad not to be in the courtroom with Donald Trump from what all the reports have said or smelt.
Yeah, I mean, I think masking is about to come back into fashion in parts of Manhattan. But maybe safety masking. DJ McGuire,
who has had a wonderful weekend watching the House pass Ukraine funding at last, and
Yay.
the Knicks and Rangers won. It's been a great weekend.
I didn't know you were a Rangers fan. How did you become a Rangers fan?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
All the kids in school were Devils fans because of New Jersey, and I hated all the kids in school, so I went with the Rangers.
Okay.
Valid. Totally valid. And last but not least, Kevin Kelton in his Rangers jersey.
In my number 7 Rod Gilbert Rangers jersey. You know, I lived and died by the New York Rangers in the late 60s, early 1970s. And then I became an Islanders fan in the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah, were you a Rangers fan out of spite and revenge, or was it like
Genuinely a
That
fan.
is self-loathing.
like most Rangers fan? There has to be like a story of anger and
Oh, yeah, many years of that.
Back then, there weren't Devils and there weren't Islanders for a while, so the Rangers were the only game in town as bad as they were.
Yes.
But
Yeah, I
isn't
remember
spite and revenge why people get into hockey in the first place?
Yes, indeed. The night they won the Stanley Cup in
1994
was the night I told my mom that I was going to marry my first wife, and I was far happier that the Rangers had won, and I probably should have taken that as a sign that we were divorced within a year.
But yes, I am a proud Rangers fan, but I'm even more prouder of what I'm about to tell you. I will be traveling this week to Florida for a big event. My mom, if she makes it another 5 days, will be 103 years old on Friday.
oh my god.
Mazel tov, Kevin. That's wonderful. And during
That is
Passover,
fantastic.
no less.
Thanks. I didn't do it. She did it.
But still, that's great. And to get to spend part of Passover with her. I hope you got your grandmother's chopped liver recipe.
I actually have a pretty good chopped liver recipe, but no, we're going out for dinner, so I won't be cooking.
Probably for the best.
Yeah.
Not that I'm disparaging your cooking. I'm just saying it's a hassle.
No, you should disparage my cooking.
I've never eaten your cooking, so I cannot comment on the health and safety issues that arise from when Kevin enters the kitchen. Speaking of things that have been cooking, Congress actually got to do some work this week. They passed some legislation to force TikTok's China-based owner to sell the company this week. The bill was part of a larger foreign aid package. This tees it up for actual immediate Senate consideration. And so, one of the main reasons that that TikTok's being challenged is because of user data and who gets their hands on it. And user data, as we all know, is a global commodity. Personal data is one of the most valuable commodities. And it begs the question, why is Congress more upset when China has access to user data than when anyone else, like Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or the U.S. government has access? And Kevin, I'm going to throw this to you. You can tell me why you think Congress is upset about this.
I have to tell you, I have no idea. And I'm one of those people, I tend to trust the U.S. government. Now, sometimes that trust has been badly misplaced. But when they tell us that something is a national security risk, I tend to believe that because it's sort of like, with COVID, I trust the experts. I trust the scientists. In this case, I trust our intelligence agencies. I have no idea why it's a risk. And frankly, I wish that they would share that with us.
Yeah, so one of my bad habits that I've acquired probably in the past year is doom scrolling.
Yeah.
Do you guys know what doom scrolling is?
Yes.
We're all there.
All right. And I get, well, that's bad for kids and that's bad for adults. But You're right. Kevin says that they say, hey, this is bad. And I'm completely on Kevin's side with that. But in this instance, they keep saying, this is so bad, we can't show you. Well, we're all adults in the room. How bad could it be? I mean, when we went through the COVID thing, they said, this is bad. We're going to show you the formulas. How bad could it really be that they can't show us? Unless there's money involved. And then, in which case, yeah, they're crooked.
Oh, there's certainly money involved. But like, what is the data that TikTok is collecting? Is it location data? Is it spending data? And why is that dangerous for the Chinese government to have? And I don't fully understand. DJ, do you have any insight into that?
No, I don't, because frankly, the user data argument was never the argument that actually won the day. It's not the reason that it got through the House.
Oh.
The reason it got through the House the first time and now the second time again is because TikTok has basically been an open sewer of misinformation on Ukraine, on Taiwan, and on the Israel-Hamas war, particularly the Israel-Hamas war. And when the first piece of legislation passed saying, look, ByteDance needs to sell this in 6 months or else it will be off our platforms, ByteDance's response was to tell all of its TikTok users this bill has passed, lie about it, and tell them to basically call every member of Congress in a screaming fury about a bill that was not actually what was passed. This one actually gives more time for a deal. It gets about a year instead of 6 months, so that's more helpful. And it's just, when Zuckerberg comes in and he says, look, you got too much misinformation on your stuff, you can argue back and forth with them. They can try to do something. But, Elon Musk is Elon Musk. But when you have a hostile regime owning a social media platform that is spewing disinformation in your country, you do something about it. And that's what this is about. It's not about the user data.
Well, I'd be curious what the numbers actually are on misinformation across Meta's platforms and across TikTok versus Twitter versus Truth Social, YouTube, Rumble, all of them. Kevin, what were you going to say?
Well, I think this falls into the category of possibly cyber war or cyber events. And, when I was younger and we were just entering the nuclear confrontation age, the Cold War, the government, to the extent that I understood it, shared with us the potential dangers of a nuclear conflict. Again, going back to my original point, I wish the government would explain to us what the danger is of China having all of this information. I'm not sure that I fully agree with DJ's analysis that it's more about misinformation. I think it is about data or some other element of information that would impinge on our national security. And I think that they should share that information with us so we can understand the problem. And therefore, as a country, we can deal with it.
Well, I think all of these points that we're making gets to the fact that TikTok, like other social media platforms, particularly the ones that are sort of this short content that kind of, are the entry point to a rabbit hole, they have become crucial to the flow of information. They're absolutely crucial. We all use them, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or, these other bite-sized platforms where we get, a couple minutes of something and it begins to form the kernel of an opinion. There are downsides, as we're saying here, the misinformation problem, but there are also upsides. And
there's an economy there. People are making their livings off of TikTok, and I think that's wonderful.
Oh, I think that's what they're content creators. I want to piggyback on what Kevin said. I really don't want the government to share any of the technology or the data with me, but I want them to share it with my 14-year-old child so that they can slowly explain it to me. So I'm just going to leave that.
Yeah, you could,
in small words.
And speaking of the 14-year-old child, Greg, I was thinking about this earlier today. My son was interested in a summer sports program, and I asked him for more information. And if you go back to our days in high school, we would have come home with a flyer and handed it to our parents. And 20 years ago, it would have been a website that, your kid would have given you the link to look it all up. My kid handed me his phone with the Instagram account of the sports program pulled up, and I could use that to start it. And there's, these platforms have actually become the infrastructure for advertising, brick and mortar programs like this.
Sure.
And it's visually appealing. It's easy to get the right information across quickly. It's easy to bookmark. And so when I see government starting to mess with that, I get very uncomfortable because it does feel like it is going to compromise parts of the economy, not just content creators, but everybody else too.
Let me ask you guys something. You guys apparently followed TikTok probably a lot more than I do. Who is your favorite TikToker?
Oh, I've got a good one right now. My favorite TikToker is Doctopus. It's this family in Oklahoma that adopted an octopus for their 8-year-old who's a big fan of octopi. And the octopus, unbeknownst to them, had been fertilized and impregnated before they got her. And she laid 50 eggs and 20 some of these little teeny bitty octopi survived. And so now they're documenting this experience of trying to keep these little tiny creatures alive and find appropriate homes for them in aquariums. So Doctopus is my favorite TikToker. What about you, Greg?
There's he's on Instagram and TikTok called Tizzy Ent.
Oh, love Tizzy. I got a Tizzy retweet once, and man, boy,
did you really?
That'll get your numbers up.
Respect. So Tizzy is someone, if there's
a dick joke. It wasn't like a.
You always, just like my grandmother, you always go with dick and fart jokes. But he's someone who, if there's a issue with justice or racism, he brings it to many people's attention. He tries to find culprits. He does very responsibly. Once he finds their identity, he turns it over to the police, but he asks his followers to help, be a better place when he sees injustices. Everything from missing children to, Karen, who's pissed off that her super's cold and said so, or like the recent Indiana student,
yes.
Asa Blanton. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And DJ, do you have a favorite TikToker? You look like you're looking up a TikToker's name.
No, I am actually not on TikTok, so I cannot answer that question. However, hearing Rebecca's answer, I now understand why Alan Tudyk's character in Resident Alien chose not to destroy the planet Earth.
For the baby octopi, it makes perfect sense. Now, speaking of things that are getting destroyed or falling apart or getting built, we've been making jokes about Infrastructure Week for quite a few years now, and it's become a punchline. But actually, the state of our infrastructure is not funny. The Port of Baltimore is currently on restricted use because a bridge fell down when a ship bumped into it. Are we falling apart as a country, or are we also falling behind by not investing in the next level of things? We were talking earlier today about some high-speed rail projects, and, there are a bunch on the agenda, but are they actually going to take off? Or, I guess, leave the station? What's the analogy there? Kevin, you were the one who brought it up. What you were talking about, one from LA to Vegas.
Yeah, well, obviously everybody knows I used to live in Los Angeles, and they've been talking about a line, two particular projects, one from LA to San Francisco and another one from LA to Las Vegas. And I was so in favor of both of those, because if you live on the West Coast, you're constantly, you want to go to Vegas and you don't want to drive the 5.5 hours from LA. You want to go to San Francisco. It's the same thing. But even though these projects were a go, and in my understanding, they're actually being built, the prices just always kept skyrocketing. It would go from $6 billion to $13 billion, and pretty soon it was $30 billion. I don't understand why this country cannot develop high-speed rail, and I think it is emblematic of a bigger problem. I hope we can get on top of it, because in the 21st century, we will be left behind if we cannot keep up with these kinds of technological developments.
And I think some of it may actually be a problem on the demand side of things. Are we just so attached to our cars that we don't want to invest in anything but cars? DJ, this economics is kind of on your resume.
Well, I'm a little confused because I thought the LA to San Francisco line sort of fell apart in a scandal when the city manager of Vinci was murdered. And oh no, wait, that was HBO's True Detective. Never mind.
You had me there.
I know. It's like, this sounds good.
This sounds like a great TV show.
I don't know this story, and I used to live there.
No, I think one of the biggest problems that we and Noah Smith, who's an economist on Substack and on the other social media stuff, he talks about this constantly, is that every infrastructure project has to go through so many permit processes and permit cycles that it is much more difficult to build something today than it was 60, 50, or even 30 years ago. And Congress did try to make this easier in 2022. It was supposed to be part of the Manchin version of the Inflation Reduction Act, and it got dropped because the far left said, no, we will not accept this. But I really think we need to take a good hard look at our permit process, a good hard look at all of the things that get in the way of building stuff, and cut it back and say we don't need to do this anymore.
I mean, those permit processes, some of those are local and state, so it's not just a federal problem. You know, we need Pete Buttigieg or somebody to call for, you know, a big review of permitting processes for infrastructure projects to, you know, see how we can cut the time on those, cut the red tape. One question I have, this is a technical question, you guys may not even know. Can a high-speed rail use the same tracks that already exist?
I'll call my 14-year-old. I'll see what they say.
I'm telling you, maybe we just need 14-year-olds doing this show for us.
Oh my goodness.
They know the TikTok and the trick track and the train speeds and all of that.
The actual answer is pure high-speed rail. No, it needs a separate kind of track. But there is one, and I'm forgetting the name, but it was in the article that we read today. And I forget which two cities it was going between, but there is one that goes about 160 miles an hour. It's not technically what we call high-speed rail, but it's much faster than contemporary modern trains. And it can use the existing track with some modernization.
Because there's like the Acela line that you know goes up and down the Northeast.
That might be it.
Yeah, that one's faster, but I think part of the reason is that it's a more express train too. It doesn't stop as many times as the Northeast.
So it can really get going.
Yeah, it can really get going, and it costs a freaking fortune.
Also, Thomas the Tank Engine, I think, needs to become high speed.
We'll put him on a high protein diet. We'll get it have him going keto and do sprints every day with Sir Topham Hatt. That's the way to do that. Speaking of ways to even build train tracks, Biden wants to stop us from buying Nippon. We want to stop Nippon Steel from buying U.S. steel and triple Chinese steel tariffs. Which I assume you need steel to build train tracks. I don't actually know. I've used I've used Legos for that in the past.
As our listeners might be able to imagine, Rebecca is basically reading this for the first time because I put this in the rundown 2 hours ago.
That's what I was going to say, DJ. I was going to say that just tripped right off your tongue.
Yeah, this one is mine. And Joe Biden is one of the last politicians from the Japan scare of the late 1980s when Japanese investment in the United States was completely off the charts. They bought the Rockefeller Center, they bought this, that, and the other. Everyone was freaking out. Then we had a recession, Japan's real estate bubble burst, and the next thing you know, they were selling it back to us at like bargain basement prices and such.
And they just wanted like a place to stay when they came to New York too. It wasn't like malicious investment either. Right. Anyway, carry on. They wanted some golf courses that they could use. It's fine.
But I do not understand why we are so worried about an ally, and Japan has been an ally for 70 odd years, buying a steel company. We really can't fall for this for the Trump nonsense of, well, if you can't make steel, you're not a real country. There are all sorts of countries that choose to import their steel. It's okay. Now I can sympathize with wanting to make sure we don't buy Chinese steel, but the best way to have fixed that, instead of raising prices on businesses and consumers, well, businesses consume steel, individuals don't, was to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership so that we would lower tariffs with our allies. That's the more cost-efficient way to do that. Joe Biden isn't going to do that because, unfortunately, no one is willing to say that they support freer trade anymore because it's supposedly not popular. But that will change as the cycles change, and I'll just have to sit back and wait for it.
Well, I have a question about U.S. Steel. How many steel companies do we actually have operational in America today? Like, is this, selling the last one?
No, I think there are roughly, I want to say there are roughly a dozen, some that are smaller than U.S. Well, they're probably all smaller than U.S. Steel, honestly.
And is the consolidation, is any of this in response to the inability to get steel out of Black Sea ports because of the Ukraine war? I mean, are these companies all sort of moving around trying to, maximize opportunity, while Russia is messing stuff up?
I'm going to say I don't think so. And the reason I'm going to jump in on this is because I follow the British press as well. And some of their large steel companies are looking to be bought out by either Indian or Japanese consortiums. And that was before the second Ukraine war, as I'll call it, started. So I don't think that's the reason.
So it's just the sort of normal shuffling of major commodities companies.
That's how I see it.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you. Kevin might.
Well, I know that DJ is a free trade proponent, and I definitely respect that. There's a couple of, I read 2 articles today, one in favor of this deal and one against it. Frankly, both sides make some great arguments. But for me, it comes down to, first of all, the steel union or the union that represents the steel workers is strongly against it. And I always err on the side of a union like that when it's for economic reasons. And there's also just the question, U.S. Steel is one of the great American logos. It's an iconic American company. And for a company named U.S. Steel to be owned by the Japanese. Now, I know that there are other American, and I say that in air quotes, companies that are owned by companies outside of the United States. But for U.S. Steel to be owned by the Japanese, it does raise some national security. I mean, just think if there was some kind of international conflict where we had to manufacture airplanes, ships, other defense materials very quickly, and a foreign nation decided to slow down or squeeze us for whatever political reason, that is a national security issue. But the other thing I wanted to bring up is the history of U.S. Steel. Now, I'm just slightly, I think, weeks or months older than you guys, but I'm old enough to remember when John F. Kennedy stood up, and DJ, I know you probably know about this too, stood up to U.S. Steel, and I did some research on this today. In 1962, U.S. Steel got into a labor dispute with its union, and the Kennedy administration mediated to help come to an agreement that ended in a new contract. And it had a modest increase in pay for union workers. A few weeks later, U.S. Steel surprised the Kennedy administration by announcing a big price increase in their products. And John F. Kennedy was livid. And he went on television during a presidential press conference, and he took on U.S. Steel in a way that we have not heard presidents take on private enterprise, quite frankly, maybe since Reagan fired the air traffic controllers. I actually posted a clip from that press conference on the mpupodcast.com webpage, if anyone wants to hear it. When you hear John Kennedy in this press conference, you will weep for the type of presidents that we long for and haven't seen, with the exception of Barack Obama. It is a magnificent performance, and I suggest that people go listen to it just to hear what a real president sounds like. But with that in mind, Kennedy stood up to U.S. Steel then. Joe Biden is standing up to the company that wants to buy U.S. Steel, and I think they were both correct.
Look, to kind of keep this in perspective, though, America is still like the third largest producer of steel in the world. That's not going to change. So if there is an issue, and U.S. Steel is not the largest steel company in America even at this point. It's the second largest. So
I stand corrected.
Oh, that's all right. I don't know if you know this. I had to look it up.
You don't have a list of top 10 steel companies just in your...
No.
What, Greg? No. I feel like I've been deceived.
It is Nucor, though. This is why I've been quiet for so long.
Is that called doom steel scrolling?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's the sky is falling and I don't think it's the affront on democracy. And we are still talking. These are industrial steel companies. There's also the Mini Steel, which produces 59%, and these are specialty steel companies, which are much smaller. There's well over 100 of them, and they produce 59% of all American steel. So there's lots of steel companies in America, and I see this might be a line in the sand, but it's not the line in the sand on the hill we should die on.
I think it's going to be really fun tomorrow at breakfast, Greg, when your 14-year-old tries to tell you something, and you're like, "Oh yeah," and you give them a lecture on steel.
I know. I'm going to be that's in the pocket now.
I'm so stoked for that.
And let's remember, this is Japan. This is a country whose prime minister had to come over here and lecture our Republican Party about funding Ukraine.
Well, maybe they deserve a steel company for that.
I just want to say, Greg, when you become a president or a prime minister, you've just said the word that will for history be associated, the line that will for history be associated with your name.
Oh, it's a great line, isn't it?
It's not the line in the sand on the top of a hill that we should die on.
That was W level.
Thank you.
Switching topics, we are seeing an uptick in campus unrest, and I'm actually having the vibe feels a little Vietnam-y to me. The young people have a lot to say and a lot of strong feelings.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, that's what we're about to discuss here. We're seeing students at multiple universities that are standing in solidarity with the pro-Palestinian encampment on the Columbia University campus. We've also seen a student be expelled from a school for a racist rant on TikTok, actually, and
that's a bad thing.
And this one, actually, this isn't even a topic of discussion. It's just a data point. Kyle Rittenhouse spoke on the Kent State campus. Man who shot people at a protest spoke on a campus where people were shot at a protest. His reception was what you'd expect.
Good.
Just
right, but he's on a college tour right now.
Yes, because he's with Turning Point, Toilet Paper USA, TP USA.
No, it's a different college tour. He's trying to decide what college to go to.
He's trying to figure out which one will actually let him in.
None of them. It's just come out that on his aptitude test when he tried to join the Marine Corps, he scored so poorly that he is permanently banned from ever applying again. So he's as dumb as a box of rocks, and every campus knows it. Setting Kyle aside, the students who've actually been accepted to universities have strong feelings about what's going on in the world. And is this a First Amendment issue? Is this a university administration issue?
It's both.
It's
Let
both.
Me take that,
yeah.
please.
And how far can each go? That's sort of where's the line?
So we live in a country that fortunately, we have the First Amendment, we have free speech. And that means that we're going to have to hear speech that we don't like. And it's happened time and time again. We used to have Nazis marching through the streets of Chicago. We had Charlottesville, which had some pretty horrible chants and some pretty horrible signs. Now we have these pro-Palestinian people that make my blood boil, but I also understand they have a right to voice their opinions. On the other hand, hate speech is hate speech, and there's nothing stopping a university from having a campus code that prohibits hate speech, and they can have students removed for violating that code. So the encampments, the protests, I don't like them. I remember when Columbia had anti-war protests in the 1970s. My cousin was going to Columbia when they famously had
broke
sit-ins.
into the president's office to have a sit-in. My dad went into it for about 3 seconds and then realized he was going to get expelled from med school and left.
Yeah,
he decided it was not worth it.
Yeah, unlike the January 6ers.
Yeah.
We do have to honor and respect the right of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to protest, but hate speech is a different crime, and I don't understand why they can't both be enforced.
Well, and I think they can be enforced, but it's the question that I think there's some subtleties of what constitutes hate speech. And everybody's got a personal lens through which they view that question. And so one person looking at the encampment at Columbia is like, it's just students stating an opinion, but other people are like, the words with which they are stating the opinion hurt me so badly that it feels like hate speech. And who do you side with? Because both sides' feelings are valid.
The other thing to remember is Columbia University, as a private university, has a bit more leeway on this than, say, the University of California at Berkeley, which is a public university, government-funded university. They have frankly different rules. There are things they can't do that a private university can do. But when the situation is bad enough that the rabbi, who is effectively a chaplain for Columbia, tells Jewish students, stay away, it is not safe, you're doing it wrong. That's it. That's the comment.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's, that becomes the comment. Has your speech crossed a line into action that is not protected and is endangering the safety of others?
Yeah, when you're saying things like kill Jews or speaking directly to individuals and threatening them, that is not free speech anymore. That is,
that's incitement to violence, or it's
verbal threats. Incitement to violence. Yeah. And so I agree with what DJ said. I agree with what Rebecca said. I think there's a world where both can coexist. It's not simple, and yet we have to do the hard thing and make sure that as much as I disagree with the pro-Palestinian point of view and the anti-Israel point of view, I do have to honor their right to express it.
That's the quote. I do not agree with what you say, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it.
May I make one request, though? Can we stop calling these people pro-Palestinian? They're pro-Hamas.
Yeah, pro-Hamas.
And that's what I don't think they care about the average Gazan.
I agree.
If you want to read a statement from somebody who does care about the average Gazan, Jamie Raskin just put out a statement on the foreign aid bills and his position on Israel and the Netanyahu government and the need for protecting the civilians in Gaza that is eloquent and thoughtful and wise, because Jamie Raskin is all of those things, and he puts it into words beautifully.
Yeah, and I know we're not going to go down not the rabbit hole, but we're not going to go too deep into Israel this week. But there's one thought that I had this week. There are still bombings going on. There are still raids going on from the air. And then, frankly, I think the Israelis have to modify their military tactics at this point. But a lot of people think it's all Netanyahu, and that once Netanyahu is no longer in office and probably Benny Gantz is his successor, they think that somehow things are going to get better. Benny Gantz is very much as right-wing, maybe more right-wing and more hawkish than Netanyahu. And if people think that simply getting rid of Netanyahu is going to fix this problem, they are sadly mistaken.
Yeah, Israeli coalitions are weird, but doesn't Gantz support a two-state solution? That would be an improvement over Bibi, who clearly does not.
If he does, and I don't know the answer to that, if he does, that would be an improvement. But I'm just saying, in terms of the war against Hamas, he is extremely hawkish. And frankly, I agree with a lot of the hawkish views. I'm just saying that if people think that it's just Bibi Netanyahu unilaterally making these decisions, they do not understand Israeli politics.
Right. If and when Gantz takes over for Netanyahu, the war will continue against Hamas. I do think it will be something where Gantz will pay a little more attention to Palestinian civilians than Bibi will. But Benny Gantz is not going to go for a ceasefire, and he shouldn't.
And again, DJ, you know foreign policy so much better than me, and I defer to that. I'm just going to say, from my reading and my understanding, I think you and I have a difference of opinion on where Benny Gantz would be in terms of prosecuting that war.
We should call Benny Gantz. He could be our guest next week.
Oh, yeah, he's booked.
Yeah.
Speaking of guests, here's another thing. I'm going off topic, but this pisses me off. We have talked about RFK Jr. on this show. Bill Maher is having him on next week. And it's just going to give this man a platform to reach another 5 or 10 million liberals who will be fooled by his BS.
Now, he is such a piece of shit. I just read that a whole bunch of people from the environmental movement are asking him to drop out because they know that he's just, he's a spoiler for Trump. And, Biden just tossed down a whole bunch of environmental protections that benefit the Alaskan wildlife preserves. And Trump will undo that in a heartbeat if RFK messes things up for him in Michigan, messes things up for Biden.
And yet there is an NBC poll out today that shows nationally Donald Trump is ahead 2 points in a 2-person race, but when it's a 5-person race, including RFK Jr., it flips to a Biden 2-point lead. So there's no
a 5-person race. Who
Kennedy,
are the other two?
Yeah, because
Stein,
also Jill
West.
Stein and West.
Oh,
Cornel
God.
West. Yes, I know. We forget about those. But the point is there's no guarantee yet that RFK Jr. is going to do more harm to Joe Biden than to Donald Trump. It could happen. I'm not going to say it won't happen, but I'm not definitely saying it will happen. And I do think there are things that Joe Biden can do to make sure it doesn't happen, but that'll extend the show another hour and we don't want to do that. So I'll stop.
And I'm going to say that I think, as much, DJ, as I would like to believe the poll you're citing is the beginning of a trend that is the beginning of the end for RFK Jr., I am choosing to believe that RFK Jr. is a problem. And as Democrats, we should address it by either calling out his crap on really thoughtful, interesting podcasts like this one here, or on social media. And, we all need to be doing what we can to contribute to the voter turnout efforts that we need for November. And if that means phone banking, text banking, uprooting your life and go into a swing state, you can stay on Greg's couch if you need to.
Ohio's not a swing state anymore.
I concur with Rebecca completely. We need to make sure everyone understands Robert F. K. Jr. is the exact kind of guy that Marjorie Taylor Greene would cheat on her husband with.
Ew.
Wow.
Ew.
And speaking of Republican politics.
That was gross. Well, all right. So, palate cleanser. Tomorrow is Monday. It will be April 22nd, and it will be the day that the trial of Donald Trump versus the state of New York truly begins, his criminal trial. The jury has been impaneled. They have been sworn in. Trump stayed awake for some of it. He's aware, I believe, that it all happened. He's not happy about it. And opening statements will be happening on Monday. Now, we won't get to see the opening statements. We won't get to hear them live. But I thought, as a fun thought exercise, if you could cast a famous actor to deliver opening statements for the prosecution of Donald Trump, who would you choose? And I'm going to start with Greg because I feel like he knows acting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was doom scrolling. What did you say? Sorry. No, look, I have two just because I think they're great and they could do anything. One, of course, the immortal Al Pacino, because if he just gets up there and just says random things like hoo-ha,
yeah, no,
hoo-ha,
he's sort of terrifying.
He's terrifying. You're out of order.
Well, yeah, but he should be the defense attorney. He should be the celebrity defense attorney.
Oh, I know. He would. Is this for prosecution?
It could be both.
It could be
Oh,
either
right.
one.
I would definitely want him on Trump's side saying, well, I've heard a lot of horse crap before, but this, that would be awesome. Just to have him do that throughout and just awesome. The other one would be the exact opposite, but still incredible act. Christopher Walken, Your Honor, I see this, but no, Your Honor, just great. Now that could be Christopher Walken or Jimmy Stewart, depending on how bad my imitation
And
is.
Greg, I want you to know you just fulfilled my dream for this segment. When I said this, I was really hoping somebody would pick Christopher Walken, and you came through for me. I can count on you, Greg, every single time. DJ, who do you want to see as your celebrity lawyer?
For the prosecution, Robert Duvall.
Okay.
I still think he played the best lawyer I've ever seen, Tom Hagen. And for the defense, Peter Cook, particularly in his role as the clergyman in The Princess Bride, because I want him to say that it was all about protecting Donald Trump's marriage.
The name of that role in The Princess Bride was The Impressive Clergyman. That's what it is in the credits. Kevin, who are you thinking?
Well, first of all, Greg said the person that I was going to say for the defense. For the prosecution, I tried thinking through my head because I love courtroom dramas. I can't really think of a movie where there was a great prosecuting attorney performance. I'm sure it exists, but I couldn't off the top of my head come up with it. So I have to borrow from great defense lawyers in films, and I've got two.
Okay.
So for the prosecution, I would either like Paul Newman from The Verdict,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Spencer Tracy from Inherit the Wind.
Okay.
And of course, there's always Atticus Finch. But those are my three favorite courtroom lawyers from movies.
See, now my first thought was, who do you want up there just to just bedazzle a jury? And my first thought was Cher.
Awesome.
Just Cher in head to toe Bob Mackie strutting around the courtroom telling the jury everything that's wrong with Donald Trump. And I'm thinking specifically of that monologue she did in The Witches of Eastwick, where she told Jack Nicholson everything that was wrong with him. And the last line is, and also, you smell. That would be perfect.
That's a little too on point, though.
Yeah, but maybe nothing is too on point these days.
That's
And
true.
then my other thought was Sir Anthony Hopkins in his most Hannibal Lecter kind of mode to just scare the shit out of everyone.
Wait, I want to amend mine because I was thinking too literal. I was thinking of people that played attorneys.
Yeah,
in
no,
movies.
okay, yeah,
I was
yeah,
just
yeah.
thinking go random. As well as
yeah.
you
I'll
can.
give. If you need time, I thought of one. Like I would like to see Peter Lowry from the old films, where he'd be like, yes, yes, as a defense. Oh, Rick, and just that would be my favorite.
Or
also.
Molly Shannon is the superstar.
Yeah. I have a co-prosecution team.
Okay.
I would like Jon Stewart and Sam Kinison.
Oh.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And for the defense, Gilbert Gottfried.
Yeah.
Seriously, Sam Kinison versus Gilbert Gottfried as lawyers. I can't,
great.
Why did we not think of that when they were both still walking this earth and we could have written a screenplay? So if anybody wants to somehow resurrect the two of them, we have an idea for them.
The prosecutor who could come up with the best closing statement for that, because the prosecutor gets to close at the end? Stephen Wright.
Oh.
He could basically read Donald Trump's defense and just look at the jury like, seriously?
Yeah.
You believe this?
Just a real dry.
Right.
Also, who would have been good with that? Mitch Hedberg.
Yep.
Remember Mitch Hedberg?
Yeah.
No,
funny man.
I'll go one. I think it should be John Lovitz in his pathological liar.
He's the defense attorney.
He's
That's
the defense-
great.
That's the ticket.
Your Honor,
that
Your
is the
Honor,
defense
and my
attorney.
Beautiful wife, Morgan Fairchild, could not be here. But everybody might tell a small fib.
Yeah, that's the ticket.
Lovitz could work for the prosecution too, because he was the actor that on SNL who played Michael Dukakis when he said, "I can't believe I'm losing to this guy."
Yes. One of the great debate sketches of all time, yes.
Well, I was thinking of Lovitz in The Wedding Singer, the scene where he's like, he's totally lost his mind, talking about Adam Sandler. All right, well, now that we have gone down memory lane for movies and actors past and who we think would give an Oscar-winning performance in court, I'd like to thank all of you for listening and going on this journey with us tonight. If you enjoy what we do here, please follow us on Instagram at MPU Fan Club. And don't forget to share our podcast on all your social media feeds, including TikTok, while you still have it. And so that way your friends can discover us as well. We do have a Substack blog page, and I promise I'm going to add something to it this week that is blocked out on my calendar. And so we'll be having opinions, essays, and random thoughts between shows. So you can look for us there. And as always, thank you to Alan Keeney for our theme music.
And we also want to mention that on our Instagram page at MPU Fan Club, we've just posted a new set of photos. Rebecca, why don't you tell everybody what they are?
All right. So on Tuesday, Stephen Miller, who I described in the photos as a botched necromancy project, stated his opinion that Donald Trump is the most stylish president ever and that everybody has been trying to dress like him. And my thought was, He wears blue suits. Nothing else. He's never worn anything that I've seen except for a blue suit. So I decided to start an ongoing thread on Twitter called Courtroom Couture, where I analyze Donald Trump's outfits, his hair, his skincare. I've taken note of his cufflinks. I called for congressional hearings into why he didn't wear a flag pin on the second day of the trial. So I have shared screenshots of that for your enjoyment. I will be continuing this on Twitter. I've been reading up on menswear, so I should have some really trenchant thoughts on tailoring soon.
There you go.
And so, guys, what are you going to be looking forward to this week besides the ongoing Trump trials and the Senate signing some foreign aid bills?
I've just started a GoFundMe page to send Christopher Walken to law school. I figure by the time he's out, Trump will still be on trial for something. So we will eventually get to hear Your Honor at least once. That's my goal. That's all I want.
And I'd just like to add that on Friday I'll be at my mom's birthday, unless Donald Trump is testifying, in which case, fuck you, Mom. I'm watching Donald Trump.
Ouch.